If you look at our state of Wisconsin, we lost 126,000 jobs here alone in the last year. We went to this government who's in debt up to their eyeballs and took bailout money, for goodness sakes, to help us get through our own finance here in the state of Wisconsin. If you're not aware, and I'm sure you are in this room, America is in trouble, Wisconsin is in trouble, and it's time that people from the private sector step forward and accept their responsibility to turn this thing back around again, and that's what we're doing in the race for governor. How does this affect your industry direct? Folks, there's a couple of things that are happening around us that are directly impacting you. Your industry is one where a lot of the decision making of going to dentistry is an elective decision. If our folks are not employed, they're going to make that decision to put off that dentistry for a period of time, and I suspect I'm telling you something you already know. Folks, we need our people employed in the state. We need good, solid jobs here that provide insurance, including dental insurance. And we need to get back to a point where we're looking positive to our future instead of moaning and groaning about the situation that we're in economically today. That's the sad state of affairs. Let me talk positive about where we're going and what we're doing. Most politicians will just bash everything and say it's so bad you better elect me to fix the problem. I'd like to lay out for you what we actually need to do. If we are to restore the state of Wisconsin to a point where people are working again and confident in their job future, we are going to need to build a model here that demonstrates how to become globally competitive in the job marketplace in which we now compete. The first thing we need to do is look at the tax structure in the state of Wisconsin. Now, everybody talks about taxes being too high in the state of Wisconsin, and they actually missed the main point. When I was in Washington, D.C., we understood that if you're going to bring taxes down, you had to control spending. What we really ought to be talking about is how we're going to control spending first, because when we control spending, then we can bring taxes down in a significant way. The second component of making us globally competitive, we need the best educated kids in the world. And when you walk into my office as governor, you should expect to see a sign right behind my desk. So every morning when I walk into that office, I am reminded of that goal. Wisconsin children will be the best educated kids in the entire world, not just the United States of America, in the entire world, period. And how do you do that? Well, a lot of times Republicans in particular start talking about choice in charter schools. I want to start somewhere else. We have some really great public schools in the state of Wisconsin. We ought to be looking at those great public schools, encouraging them to be even better, and once we've got the model set that we understand what they're doing, we ought to replicate those schools all across the state of Wisconsin to the best of our ability in public education. We also have some poor and failing public schools in Wisconsin. It's where we have poor and failing public schools that we ought to be looking at choice and charter as competition for those public schools. As governor, I will bring the most unique background to that office as it relates to education of any governor the state of Wisconsin has ever had. I have a background, all of my training, my undergraduate degree, my graduate degree, and the postgraduate work I did at Madison are all training to be a principal in the public school system and a superintendent of schools. That is what my educational background is. I bring with it the experience of teaching in a public school, teaching in the UW system, teaching at a private college, and 7 years ago we started our first choice school in the city of Milwaukee. Third component, and this is something that's not understood very well in the United States of America at all at this point in time. The environment is a very important consideration. When you look at our job business climate in the state of Wisconsin, we have put the environment in a position where it's literally driving jobs out of our state, and we've got one party that's saying, I don't care as long as we reduce our carbon emissions and improve our environment, and you got the other party that's just pushing back against that, saying don't do that because it drives jobs out of here. The wrong solution to the problem. We need to look at our environment and these rules and the regulations and the red tape and the taxation and all of those things that are hurting our businesses and ask ourselves, is there a way to achieve a better environment but do it in a way that is economically viable and market driven? So when we look at an environmental message, what I would like to do is be talking about how we can limit some of these rules, regulation, red tape, and taxation that's driving our businesses out of here, at the same time we achieve our environmental goals of improving the environment for future generations. At the end of the day, it seems to me that we need to be thinking about what we can do to bring jobs to this state of Wisconsin. It impacts your industry directly because when the people are working and confident in their future, they're more willing to do things that maybe in their mind might be elective, and it's going to help your business as well. I want to come industry specific on just one other topic before I finish here or open it to questions. The reimbursement rate that you're getting from the underserved as the government asks you to take care of patients that are not paying their own way. We cannot expect from the government end that you're going to perform this service at a loss to you. If you want to do some of this on your own, gratis, for good of the community, that's great. But we can't, as a government, expect you to be picking up the tab on this. So when we're looking at reimbursement rates from the government for the work that you're doing, it has to at least match your costs. Folks, I'm in business, and I understand very clearly that if the government asks you to do something and then reimburses you at below your cost, that what actually is going to happen is that loss to you has to be passed over to the business owners in the private sector, increasing the cost of doing business. That is not an okay solution to dental care in the state of Wisconsin for the underserved. We have to get to a point where we recognize that somebody is paying the bill. I mean, you can't keep your doors open without making a profit on what you're doing, or at least breaking even on that sort of work.
All of your ideas sound really good, but you have a situation in Madison where the House and the Senate are doing things that are not what you have in mind. If that issue does not change in the near future, how are you going to work at getting those things taken care of when the House and the Senate right now are going to be working against that kind of those ideas?
That's a very good question, and for those of you that don't know my background while I was in the United States House of Representatives, I encourage you to check out our website and see some of the things we went through. The answer to your question is it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very, very difficult. And if I can just, I've got 25 stories like this, I'll just relate a single story from Washington, D.C. When we went to Washington, we had a Democrat president, we had a Republican House, and we had a Republican Senate. When I got there, I was shocked to find that Republicans like to spend money almost as much as the Democrats did. So if you were actually there to balance the federal budget, you had as much trouble on both sides of the aisle. So I had never been in politics before. I didn't really know what the rules, and I didn't know about party rules and all that kind of stuff when you go to Washington, D.C. So I was in a committee meeting, appropriations committee, where they actually spend money. It was the first bill that I was in a meeting for, sitting around a table. There was probably 25 or 30 Republicans at that table writing up this bill. And I was the least seniority, and so I was the last one to get to say anything. And I watched as the chairman went around that room and added pork to the bill for every single person sitting in the room. And I'm sitting there thinking, I thought we just ran a campaign that said we're going to balance the budget. So when it got to my turn, it was a $3 billion bill. You want to take a shot at what we did? I asked the question, we're going to spend $3 billion. Where is the money coming from? How are we going to pay for it? And I mean, if they could have thrown their pencils down on the paper in front of them, they literally dropped their pencils and stared at me like I was from another planet. What happened out of that, and I didn't understand this going in, but apparently if you're on a Republican committee and it's a Republican bill, you have to vote for it no matter what. So I said, I'm not voting for this bill because you're spending $3 billion and nobody knows where it's coming from. Eventually, they went through the hierarchy of the Republican leadership who explained to me the rules of politics. Finally, it was Newt Gingrich himself who took me for a walk down the hall and said, Mark, you don't understand. You've got to vote for this bill in committee, and if you don't, your career in politics is over. And I looked Newt back in the face and I said, Newt, I don't have a career in politics. I'm a home builder. Well, things went on. They literally, and this is a true story, Newt, for my good, and he believed it was for my good, sent 3 members of Congress to prevent me physically from getting to this vote, because if I cast this vote, my career was over and Newt was going to take care of me. Well, there was press there, so I got to the vote and I voted no. And when I voted no that night, Tommy Thompson called me up and said, Mark, you're doing a great job. I'm thinking to myself, well, okay. The next morning, the chairman of the committee informed me that I was no longer on the committee and that I had been kicked off. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel had a blast with it. The headlines were this big. Newman doesn't know what he's doing. He's never been in politics before. On and on and on and on it went. At any rate, at that point, I wrote a letter that night to the chagrin of my staff. And the letter, I wrote it myself. The essence of the letter was, I can't vote my conscience in the United States House of Representatives, and the result is I'm going to be getting kicked off a committee, then I'm sorry that I only have one committee to get kicked off of in this Congress. And that day changed. It changed, you guys. And it wasn't just me. It changed Congress. Because what happened is about 25 members went to Newt, and they said, from now on, we are going to vote our conscience in this Congress. And we are not going to be punished if we vote for what we believe is in the best interest of the future of this nation. And they told Newt Gingrich that they were going to vote present on every bill until he got this thing straightened away. Well, the rest is history. Newt put me on 2 subcommittees. If you check it out, they've never had a freshman member of Congress on both budget and appropriations. At any rate, we got things put back together. Congress changed on that day, and from that day forward, for the rest of my term of service at least, there were no more issues about voting your conscience.